Hey, good morning to everybody. Happy Monday. It's Daryl here. It's bright and freaking early, 4 a.m. here in Connecticut on the East Coast. Okay, this morning I want to talk about a Quinnipiac poll. It was a poll. The question was, if America was, say tomorrow, if America was invaded, like the Ukraine is being invaded now, if we were invaded tomorrow by Russia or China or whoever, would you stay and fight or would you run? Okay. So they asked this, they divided it into groups, ages like 18 to 35, 35 to 50, 50 and over. They divided it into men to women, and then they divided it into Democrats and Republicans. And there was no big surprises. More men than women said they'd stay and fight. Just like you're seeing in Ukraine, that's kind of traditional. Young people were less likely, considerably less likely, 18 to 35. Now they say that they wouldn't stay and fight, and the first thing I think, if I try using empathy, if you're young, you think I got a lot of my life ahead of me. Why would I? Politicians, you think about this. Why would I give my life? I think they still have a lot of free spirit. They haven't sunk their roots in, and it's more about individuality. I don't know if that explains it, but that didn't surprise me. It really didn't. Now, the interesting thing, this was all these conservative media sites were talking about this poll. And then it came to Republicans and Democrats. Democrats, now in this poll, 40% of Democrats said they stay and fight. The rest said they'd run away. Republicans were the brave ones. 75% said they stay and fight. Okay, so this is all over the conservative media sites. When I was looking at the liberal stuff, there was no word this Quinnipiac poll, and I could see it casts liberals, the way it's phrased and set up, it casts liberals in a bad light, or Democrats, right? And so I started reading the different media sites. I'll have the links down below. I picked one. The name of this media site was Clay and Buck. Now, I'm kind of stereotyping here, I admit it. Clay and Buck, I kind of pictured a typical Southern conservative, So I read this one. I'll link to it down below. And I wasn't wrong. They had some MMA fighter, Bryce Mitchell, some little dude. And this guy was from Arkansas, and he says how he doesn't know what's going on in the world, and he doesn't care. But if that fight came to America, he'd dig his heels in and fight for Arkansas and all this other rhetoric. But he claims he doesn't know what's going on in the rest of the world, and he doesn't care. That kind of reminds me of typical Trump supporter rhetoric. But then he goes on and he just starts spewing stuff about Burisma and Hunter Biden. And so he doesn't know a lot what's going on in the world, but he obviously listens to some rhetoric from somewhere, because he knew an awful lot about Burisma, and so he just went off on this propaganda. This is an MMA fighter saying how he'd stay and fight for America, right? So I was looking at this, and basically this is what I came down to. It's a flawed question. It really is. They didn't take into consideration human nature. They're asking people, would you stay and fight, or would you run? And you would think, when you're asked that question, what's the first thing you think of? You picture yourself defending your home, your wife, your kids, fighting, dying last breath, saving what you love. But then I started thinking about it. What are you really picturing when you answer that question? You're picturing how you're going to be perceived. I truly believe that. I started thinking about that. This is more about this. I think people, when they're asked this question, they think about how other people will view them. And then it started to make more sense to me. You look at Trump supporters and how loud and with all the flags in the front yards and all that stuff, the bumper stickers, the whole thing about the 2020 election, about how their argument is that the election was stolen because so many people came out for Donald Trump. The flags, the bumper stickers, Trump supporters were everywhere. No, Trump supporters were just loud and obnoxious, but they weren't the majority. I think for some reason, I'm not a psychologist, but I think Trump supporters and conservatives are more cognizant of fitting in with society. I think Democrats are more less likely to jump on the bandwagon, more individualistic. I think they'd be less likely to consider how people will view them, and probably a more honest answer. And then here's the real fact of it. You don't know what you're going to do until it happens. What you're doing, when you answer this question, you're really telling people what you want them to know about you. That I'm brave and I'm patriotic. That's the question they're answering here. Because until the minute comes down, until it actually happens, there's a lot of people, I believe, that say they wouldn't stay and fight. And they probably would end up staying and fighting. There's a lot of people, a very lot of people, I believe, that say they'd stay and fight. But when they actually saw somebody get blown to pieces right next to them, or, actually saw the blood, smelled the blood. Yeah, blood smells. I've smelled it before. A lot of those people that claim they'd stay and fight would probably run. This question really is it's not about how patriotic you are. It's about how big a BSer you are, really. It's about what you want other people to believe. And that's why, then I started to think, that's why it's all on these conservative pages. They want people to believe that conservatives are more braver or more patriotic. It's all about how they look to their peers. Whereas Democrats or younger people are less concerned with that. And then, like I said, when it really comes down to it, say you're starving, and I just saw this. I started binge watching this show, Terror. It's a real story about two ships that were stranded in ice in the Arctic, and cannibalism came up. Now, I'm not saying I would ever go along with cannibalism, but you don't know what you would do in extreme situations. You can talk the talk, but would you walk the walk? That's what it comes down to with this Quinnipiac poll. It's easy to say, yeah, I'd fight and stand up and fight for America, and I'd fight to the death for old glory, blah, 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 blah. But what you're really saying is, this is what I want people to think about me. Because it's not even a realistic question. You can't picture yourself in that life and death situation. You could say all day that you'd stay and fight. But when it comes down to it, you have no idea what you would do. I think a lot of people, this is more a poll about human nature and honesty and dishonesty and peers and how people wanting to fit in, more than it's a question about bravery or being patriotic. Like I said, getting back to the cannibalism thing, I'm sure almost 99.9% of people would say they'd sooner starve to death than submit to cannibalism. But I've heard that starving is one of the worst, most painful things you could ever, you don't know what your mind would go through. I know this from drug addiction, going through withdrawals. You say that you wouldn't do a lot of things. There's a lot of lines you wouldn't cross. But when you're pushed to that limit, you could talk the talk all day, but when it comes to walking the walk, it's a whole different scenario. You could sit here all day and say you wouldn't do this or you would do that. But when it comes down to it, none of us know how would we really react under these stressful situations. What this poll shows is that Republicans, conservatives, are more concerned with how they're viewed than Democrats are. And older Americans wanting to fit in. Once you get older, you just kind of want to be quiet and fit in. For instance, how many 50-year-olds do you see wearing skinny jeans? Or with a different haircut, being individualistic? Not too many, because they just give up the fight. They want to fit in. They want to... It's just human nature. And that's what I believe with this poll. This poll doesn't... This poll says more about the push to fit in and say the right things than it says anything about being patriotic. this Quinnipiac poll is, it's more a demonstration on jumping on the bandwagon than being a patriot. All right. I'll have the links down below. You guys have a great Monday.